Hello again. This is a lecture on Hayek, Principles, and Expediency. First, let me give some background on Hayek. Hayek is an economist by training. He's a Nobel Prize winner for his work on the division of knowledge in society. And typically one would expect an economist to take a very no-nonsense, cost-benefit approach to social decision-making. But that's not necessarily the case in this piece, as we'll see. Hayek is known for his study of something called spontaneous orders. More on that later in the semester. He's also known for his emphasis on the limits of human knowledge and the limits of our capacity to rationally organize society from the top down. And that's more of the focus of the piece you had to read for today. First, we have to note that ultimately Hayek is a consequentialist of a loose sort, but his objection is more specifically to the notion that the government should use act utilitarianism to decide how to act. And here the government includes decision makers in the legislature, like congressmen, as well as bureaucrats who have to make administrative law. So, what is Hayek's critique of this kind of the culture of public decision making, which I think we should read as being act utilitarian? First, he makes an epistemic criticism. He says that he doesn't think that we are capable of correctly gathering and processing all the information necessary to make good, thorough predictions about the consequences of specific public policies. The word epistemic here simply means concern with the nature and origins of human knowledge and understanding. More specifically, he thinks that decision makers systematically discount the benefits of freedom and overrate the benefits of restrictions and regulations. Why is that? The reasons are twofold. First, he claims, and he's probably right about this, that the benefits of freedom are necessarily uncertain. The value of freedom largely lies in the unknown possibilities that it may permit at some indefinite point in the future. So the benefits of freedom are fundamentally uncertain. That's the value of allowing people to be free, is they will do unexpectedly good things that will benefit everyone. So, if the benefits of freedom are to bring about benefits that are uncertain in the future, that decision makers will have no ability to predict, what happens is that decision makers face a choice. They face a choice between a certain benefit of a known size, that's what happens when they choose to regulate, and an uncertain benefit of an unknown size. That's what happens when they let people make decisions for themselves. The rational decision maker will always take a certain benefit and discount the unknown benefit of an uncertain size. It only makes sense. Take the benefit that you know will occur. The second reason act utilitarian decision makers discount the benefits of freedom is more political. Credit for certain benefits to specific constituencies can be claimed. Credit for unknown benefits to frequently unknown individuals of policies that don't do much more than leave people alone cannot be credited to any decision maker or politician. So when faced with the choice between a policy that they can claim credit for, on the one hand, and a policy that decision makers cannot claim credit for, decision makers always opt for the one that they can take credit for. He also notes that individual decision makers are prone to certain failures of rationality. They tend to have a hard time diagnosing where the problem is coming from, and therefore they tend to propose the wrong sorts of solutions. Again, there's probably two reasons for this. The first reason is that they're often invested in past policies. And the second reason is that they simply fail to understand the workings of a spontaneous order. That is to say, they often attribute existing problems to natural circumstances rather than the long-term effects of past policy choices. In order to sort that debate out, though, we would have to know more about his views on spontaneous order than we do from this piece. So I'm going to leave that one mostly aside for now. We will talk about that later on. So are these criticisms of Hayek's well-founded? Well, I think to accept Hayek's criticism, you have to accept his view that liberty produces many unseen long-term benefits that are hard to attribute to any particular freedom, and that this sort of general state of liberty is worth its long-term costs. You also have to accept that decision makers who have read Hayek will succumb to the pressures to over-legislate or continue to legislate in the wrong places. So you have to assume that regulators can't update their decision-making practices in the face of new information about what produces a long-run benefit. But if you do grant these assumptions to Hayek, then you do have a strong reason to be a rule utilitarian, or a rule consequentialist of some sort at any rate, rather than an act utilitarian. That is to say, you have good reason to keep to certain basic principles when you legislate, even when you could, at least apparently, gain a short-term, near-certain benefit from violating those principles. And you should do this because it's not possible in advance to know which rules will produce overwhelmingly positive long-term consequences. That is to say, when you make that judgment call, you are discounting the value of liberty, and since you don't know where potential progress, potential benefits are going to come from, you are essentially taking a stab in the dark. Okay, if you are a utilitarian, how might you respond to Hayek's skepticism? Well, I don't think that's clear exactly how you would respond. One type of response is to say, well, if you care about consequences, why would you ever accept less rather than more? I mean, after all, we discount uncertainty and risk all the time. A risky proposition later is not as good as a certain proposition now. So if you apply a sort of discount rate, there's no real problem with act utilitarianism, at least in principle. A second consideration is that even if maximization in an act utilitarian fashion is impossible to calculate, we just don't have enough information, as Hayek claims, that doesn't make it the wrong criteria. Hayek might be confusing action guiding and evaluative criterion. That is to say that from a post hoc situation, that is to say after the fact, it's quite possible that utilitarianism is the right criteria, but from an ex ante point of view, that is to say before the fact, that doesn't mean that creates the right rule, the right decision-making rule. Because at the end of the day, I think nothing Hayek says makes him a non-utilitarian. He has just a different understanding about how to maximize the long-term net pleasure or net benefit to society than act utilitarians do. Of course, if utilitarians decide to claim Hayek as one of their own, this tends to undercut the attractiveness of utilitarianism in some ways. That is to say, one of the reasons that utilitarianism is attractive in the first place is because utilitarianism looks like it can precisely tell us what to do in specific circumstances. It appears to be akin to a decision-making science, which ultimately enables us to come up with precise answers about what to do. If utilitarianism at the end of the day admits that we can only get vague rules and principles of good conduct for government, then at that point it's not any more precise than the theories that utilitarians tend to criticize, like deontological theories. So, I'll part with this. First, what do you think? Do decision makers overestimate their ability to predict the consequences of public policies? And two, do you think that there are powerful incentives at work to favor legislation over non-legislation? I'll see you in the discussion boards.